Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today I babysat Karen's kids, but now she's refusing to pay me after snooping through my phone. I'm 22, female. I'm in college, but I work as a babysitter after school. I've been working for this mother since I was 20, and she had never had any complaints about me, and because her kids love me so much, that's why I've stayed with her for 2 years. I have a friend who was asking me what it's like to work with kids. I said it's fine, not great, but not too bad. Kids can be tiring, you just have to control yourself and don't let tantrums get under your skin, and it's gonna be fine. I said that even though I'm a person who doesn't generally love kids, because I've held this job for 2 years with 0 complaints, it's proof that I know how to deal with kids and how to throw away my personal feelings when it comes to work. I told my friend that through text message, and I was just giving her my raw experience and opinion. Now, 2 weeks later, I was at the lady's house and I left my phone charging, but I got notifications from said friend. The lady was still home and noticed my phone getting bombarded with notifications, so she for some reason opened it, and I guess she knew the PIN code because I sometimes give the kids my phone to play games. She took screenshots from the chat and airdropped them to herself, then left. I didn't realize that until my duty was finished and I went home saying that she hadn't sent me the payment yet. I waited until it was later. Then I texted her, but she sent me the screenshots saying that I'm an awful human being and I don't deserve money and she doesn't want to see me in the house again. I already found a new job, but my friend told me I should report the lady for refusing to pay me, especially since she waited to fire me until after I had finished babysitting for her. Not the jerk. I'm glad you'll never work for her again because anyone who would go through your phone without your permission is a problem. Anyway, you need to get paid for your services, and hopefully the texts speak for themselves and don't make you look like she's trying to portray you, and that'll be clear to anyone who sees them. I hope this doesn't have any lingering effects on your ability to work for another family. My boyfriend refuses to propose to me. I got revenge. I'm 29, female. My boyfriend is 31, male, and we've been together for 7 years now. I had voiced that I wanted to be engaged before the 4-year mark. He agreed at the time. When we were half a year from reaching our 4-year anniversary, I had revisited the topic of marriage and I told him I was expecting to get married. He was finishing up his master's program at the time and said he wanted to get out of student debt again and get his finances in order. I bit my tongue and I understood that we're partners and I can try to meet him halfway. He earns good money and we already moved in together 2 years into our relationship, and we did long distance when he was in his master's program. My job is remote, so I moved to his hometown 3 hours away from the original. I've been seeing all my friends and cousins get married, and it's hard to feel happy on such a joyous occasion when your ring finger feels so empty and everyone starts asking you. Lately, my partner has been thriving in work and enjoying his new life, and it's almost as if he forgot about our personal goals. When I initiated discussion again, I could sense he was dragging his feet. He didn't have enough money for a ring or savings for a wedding, when he would very well buy the motorbike he always wanted since he was a kid. He said our life is good as is. Why do we need a stamp of validation from the world? You're on your own health insurance, so what's the point? All of this just left me heartbroken. Why don't I deserve to be his wife after being his girlfriend for so long? Does he not love me enough to make a romantic gesture for me, choosing me over his useless bike? I talked to my sister who got engaged 2 years in her relationship, and her approach was simple yet effective. She told me to withdraw all my wife privileges from him until I get that title, that he has to earn me, not cleaning and cooking for him, moving out, not paying for his expenses sometimes, stuff like that. My boyfriend got mad because I didn't renew our lease with him, and he told me that's a very poor way of handling things and we need this constant in our life to preserve our relationship, telling me that's the kind of precedent I'm setting up for our eventual marriage. I have been a wife for you without the title. I gave myself completely to you, only to expect you to do this one thing for me. I've waited long enough. I don't really believe in ultimatums, so I'm not going to force your hand. I'm simply acting as your girlfriend now. If you really want our relationship to go back to what it was, you better give me an upgrade. What's the correct way of handling this? Edit. To all the dense folks asking me why I don't just propose, I have to say something. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Some people like things to be traditional, and he and I are certainly that way. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. In our culture, in 2023, in our relationship, a woman making comments about being ready to marry and wanting to get engaged is her proposal. Then it's up to the man to either accept by proposing formally or decline by not proposing. And at that stage, the woman proposing is embarrassing herself by doing so. It's just a dumb gotcha where people like to play faux dumb and scratch their heads at how daft cultural norms are and like to pretend that things have evolved to be how they wish them to be in the future. Similar to the fake disingenuous, "Wait, you've discussed marriage and both said you want it? Surely that means you're engaged. Why are you waiting for a ring? He probably doesn't even realize you need one. You're engaged. Just book a venue." Which pretends that proposals don't actually exist as a way of formally asking for marriage instead of merely expressing positive feelings towards the idea. Will you genuinely be happy if he decides to propose now, especially after you've pressured the situation, knowing that he never truly wanted to in the first place? This was my first thought. It's kind of embarrassing to force him to propose by moving out. He's made it clear he doesn't want to propose and doesn't care that that's what OP wants. OP just isn't listening. Why bother moving out and still dating or being in a relationship? He doesn't want to propose and doesn't value a marriage certificate. Moving out won't change his mind. There's nothing special or romantic about the proposal and marriage now. Even if it does happen, OP will always know she had to strong-arm him into it. Break up. He doesn't want to get married. Do you really want to marry someone who's only willing to even consider it so you'll start doing his chores and paying his bills again? Just break up and find a guy who's actually enthusiastic about the idea instead of continuing to argue with this one about why he should care. Maybe your boyfriend doesn't want to risk losing half his crap in a few years from now when you decide to leave him, which there's over a 50% chance of. He sounds like a pretty smart guy to me. Knowing that once you decide to leave me for another man, I'll have to give you half of all the money I've worked my butt off for ever since we got married? No thanks. I've been through it. Almost every friend I have has been through it. Sadly, it's become the cultural norm, and I don't think it's changing anytime soon. You are petty and childish. No wonder he doesn't want to marry you. Marriage is an outdated concept. He should dump you and move on with his life. You can go be miserable alone. Try to steal my car? Enjoy losing your partnership. I was young, and I had my little hand-me-down Acura since I was 16. My parents let me borrow it, and I paid for everything. Repairs, insurance, gas, etc. When I graduated high school, it was my graduation present. I had actually paid about $1,000 to them to cover insurance for a long time, not long before they dropped having me pay for insurance because neither my sister nor stepsister were paying theirs. My stepdad was a mechanic and specialized in cars made for racing and car shows. He and his boss had had their vehicles featured in car magazines and were sold internationally. He took care of the repairs for it, and I paid for the parts. When I got to be around 23 to 24, I had moved pretty far away, so obviously my stepdad wasn't taking care of the repairs anymore. But I did know some basic things. I was driving down the road when suddenly smoke and steam came pouring out from under my hood. I panicked, but pulled over as safely as I could and quickly called AAA. They sent someone to come tow the car to their garage to get it repaired. I get to the garage after I finally get a ride since they wouldn't let me ride in their truck. They tell me the mechanic is looking at it now. I wait a bit and then the guy comes out. He looks cornered and then lays it on me. "Welp, your whole radiator blew. It will cost about $2,000 or so to have it replaced." I began to panic because that was worth more than the car was. Then with a slight smirk, he says, "I'll tell you what, I'll pay you $2,000 and just take it off your hands for you, since its repairs are worth more than the car itself." Alarm bells went off immediately. This guy was obviously trying to scam me and take my car. Now I'm upset. I don't let it show though and say I have to make some phone calls. I step outside and walk around and peek into the garage bay. The guy steps back into the garage and goes to his bench and starts chatting with the other mechanic. He's grinning up a storm, and plastered all over his workbench are photos of modified cars. One of the photos happens to be my stepdad's boss's car, which is a bright yellow Acura and hard to miss. This was the one at the front, and it all clicked into place. I called my stepdad and asked him how likely it was that the radiator had completely blown. He said it was highly unlikely, but not impossible. I explained everything to him, and he told me, "Do not sell that car. He's trying to get it because he wants to kid it out. Ask if he can show you exactly in the engine where the problems were. If he shows you, he might be legit, but take photos and send them to me so I can be sure. If he refuses or attempts to distract and dissuade you, he's lying, and get it towed to another shop right away. Do not let them do anything until I verify." I hung up and put back on my distraught face, making my way back into the office. I asked the manager if the mechanic could show me exactly where the problem was. The manager went and got the mechanic, and wouldn't you know it, he absolutely refused to show me, saying I wouldn't know what I was looking at. There was no point because it was completely busted and any other excuse he could. I told them, please do not make any repairs. I'm going to have it towed to another shop. They got angry and tried to dissuade me again, but I wouldn't budge. I called AAA to see if they would cover having it towed to a different location. They said no, that it had already been taken to a AAA garage, so any other towing would be on me. I arranged my own tow and had them tow it to a shop right next to where I was living that had the best reviews in town. The reviews all made a point of saying that they never tried to get people to do unnecessary repairs and often did their best to save people money. One even said they had taken it to a different place and they tried to get him to do a bunch of stuff before being brought there and told most of it was completely unnecessary. After I had it towed, I got a call from AAA again. They wanted to know why I was having it towed to a different shop as it seemed very odd and they were following up on that request. I told them everything. The lady was silent for most of my story. She asked me, do they have AAA logos on their vehicles? I confirmed that they didn't have just one, but no less than 6 AAA logos on each tow vehicle they had and was prominently displayed on their website, and pictures of their trucks were on there too. She stayed silent for a while and said she would call me back again before hanging up. The other shop looked over my car and everyone was super kind and friendly. The mechanic came and got me from the waiting room and took me back to the shop. He pointed into the engine. See that hose there? It's the factory hose. It's over 20 years old. It ruptured because it's so old. I'm surprised it lasted this long. I asked what about the whole radiator being blown, and he looked at me like I had grown several heads. What? No, of course not. I even tested it and it was fine. Well, beyond its labeled rating. Whoever told you that was lying. He went back into the office and I explained everything to them and they looked at me horrified. Again, the mechanic interjected. What a jerk! How dare he lie to try to steal your car like that? What's the shop's name so I can make sure no one I know ever goes there? Trying to say it will cost $2,000 to repair when it just needs a $20 hose replaced. They fixed up my car and after I got it home I got a call. It was AAA again and the lady asked if I had any updates. Boy, did I fill her in. I didn't leave anything out. Everything the mechanic had said, the discrepancy in the repair costs, the actual repair required. She was silent, but I could hear her fingers madly typing away. Once I was done, she said, I'm so sorry for what happened. We take these things very seriously. Don't worry, they won't get away with this. A week later, I checked on that shop. All the AAA logos were gone, and they were no longer listed as being a AAA-approved business. Would I be the jerk if I accepted an offer to work abroad against my husband's wishes? I, 26 female, got an offer from my boss to move abroad next year for 6 months to open a new branch of our agency and be a branch manager. It's a 2-hour flight away. It's an incredible offer to get at my age, and I worked my butt off for the past 2 years as a project manager and team leader to get here. I started off as the former role, organically became the latter one as well. I'd have all expenses with the move covered. It's a dream come true for me career-wise. Here's the issue. My husband, who's 29, doesn't want to move. He's about to have an exam in December to finally get all necessary qualifications for his profession. Think like bar exam in the US. His salary would go up and he'd be able to be independent. But only in our country. I'm not sure he'd be able to find a job abroad and he really doesn't want to move. I'm making 3 times his salary and we'd still live comfortably, but understandably he doesn't want a break in his career, especially when it's finally going to take off. He wants to save as much as possible to buy a house, have kids, etc. I want the same, but not necessarily now, perhaps in a year or so. We don't have enough saved to do it earlier anyways, and I want to negotiate my salary for the new position so that we would still be on track with all these plans. For a little context, he's always been more domestic, doesn't care to learn more languages or travel, which is fine. I, on the other hand, consider myself more of a cosmopolitan person. I speak 3 foreign languages, and I'm currently learning a 4th one. Always dreamt of international career, whether it's about being able to travel or just move abroad. During our relationship, I did move abroad twice for more than a year, so we know that long-distance relationship is doable, but when I came back 3 years ago, we discussed that we don't want to do that anymore, so I stayed. When we talked about the opportunity, he instantly became cold and short with me. We're speaking, etc. normally, but anytime the topic comes up, he gets annoyed. Doesn't say no to me going alone or with our dog, but isn't happy for me nor wants me to go. Would I be the jerk if I accepted the offer? Edit. Okay, I see a lot of comments that were not compatible due to him wanting to stay and me going abroad. When we met, we both wanted to live abroad. He was meant to finish his degree and join me. But turns out you can't find a job in his field outside of the country unless you're a genius. Neither me nor him knew that. It's not like he hates traveling, he simply can't due to his work. Yeah, he's now used to that. Me, not so much. 3 years ago when we came back so that he could continue his career, we agreed to stay in one place for a longer time. Until that point, me, him, or both of us moved at least once every year, either together or one of us. It wasn't a promise that neither of us would go anywhere ever. It's been 3 years in one city, the longest I've ever lived in one city since childhood. Do what you want with that. Just wanted to clarify some things. Update. After reading your guys' comments, I decided to wait until Sunday to sit down and talk. That way, both me and my husband could have space to process our emotions. I noticed that my excitement was clouding my judgment, and reading how many of you were saying that my job is more important than him really made me take a step back from thinking about the possibilities and focus on the present. Plus, I had to leave for the weekend to attend a course in another city, so Sunday seemed like a good time. After I came back, my husband picked me up and almost immediately said, "Let's go." I didn't get what he meant, so I asked where, and he said, "To move to that country. I just have 2 conditions. One is that you will have a proper contract that states every single expense the company will cover and that you will wait until my exam to make the final decision on the specifics. As for now, I can't process thinking about the move. I have too much on my plate." I was floored. I asked him if he was sure, and what about his job and career? He said that yes, he's sure, as he has always wanted to live in that country for a while someday, and this seems like a good moment. That he will be able to find something, and if not, we'll still be fine as long as it's only for 6 months. Yesterday I talked with my boss and asked if we can come back to the planning in December, as it would still give us enough time to organize everything until March, his deadline for the project to start. Explained to him that my husband needs to focus on his exam now, so we won't be able to plan the move. Fortunately, he understood, and after a bit of back and forth, said that the offer is on the table before Christmas. Perhaps very anticlimactic for everyone suggesting divorce or me leaving to go be a girl boss I always wanted to be. But life is about balance and compromise. Sometimes just not between the parties that we thought. It's not me versus my husband, but us against the world. Or at least my boss's request to decide about such a huge thing in a week. Especially that it wasn't my goal in the company. This is literally the first time someone other than a co-owner would leave for months to open a new branch. You didn't compromise anything for your husband. OP. I compromised with my boss on the deadline, not with my husband, that's true. But my husband isn't someone to be forced to do things he sees no benefit in. He actually likes the country a lot and is excited that we can move there with all expenses covered. I think he was shocked and scared at first, which is understandable. If the roles were reversed and you heard him bragging on Reddit about compromising, would you feel good about that and respected? Put yourself in his shoes, but I bet you won't because you're not willing to do any introspection. OP. I don't know if you're projecting here or what, but my husband is a grown man who doesn't need babying and can make his own decisions, such as with him wanting to move and having certain conditions. He always thinks carefully before deciding on something, and when that moment comes, he has decided. If I went to him and started asking if he was sure, whether he feels pressured, etc., he'd be like, "I gave you my stance, did I not? Then stop digging." When he says a hard no, it's a hard no and I respect that. When I say absolutely not, guess what? He also stops pushing. In this situation, he simply needed time to come back with yes, hard no, yes, but. What if he said hard no to the move or long-distance relationship? I'd probably sulk for a while, but stay. Once my initial excitement wore out and the feedback I got put me back on the ground, I agree that it's a lot to ask someone and wouldn't be okay to push against him. Am I the jerk for blowing up at my boyfriend for finishing a tub of sour cream in one day? I feel absolutely ridiculous posting this here, but I'm literally crying about this and wondering if I'm crazy overreacting. As with everywhere in the US, grocery prices in my area are astronomical, and I've had to completely change the way I budget for food. I have to be aware of every penny I spend in order to get the most out of my money when it comes to food. Every week I have a grocery budget. I plan out all the meals, and what I get for the week is what we have. I do not do extra grocery runs during the week unless it's absolutely necessary. My boyfriend pays for about 30% of the groceries, and I pay for 70% because he pays more for utilities, so it evens out. However, I always tell him if he wants additional food or if he's still hungry, he can get it himself. Keep in mind, we are not portion restricted. I bought a standard-sized tub of sour cream, and it was supposed to be used in 3 different meals. I told him this. I came back home today ready to make dinner, and it was gone. Not even used for one meal. He just snacked on it throughout He snacked on it? Ew. He just snacked on it throughout the day. Admittedly, I blew up and started crying, asking him why he would do that when he knows that it was supposed to be used for several meals. I try so hard to budget and save money, and I feel like he just doesn't care. I told him he can either buy a new tub or I'm not cooking for the rest of the week. I told him it's a matter of respect. He thinks it's no big deal and I can just go get a new tub and is making a point of saying I should be the one to get it, not him. He says I'm being dramatic for crying over sour cream, and I know it's not super expensive, about $3 where I'm at, but it's the principle. I'm just upset that he can't respect what I'm trying to do and he doesn't understand that we're strapped for money right now. Am I the jerk? Update. For those of you who said it's not really about the sour cream, but about being disrespected, you're 100% correct. Also, the Greek yogurt has remained untouched, so I'll be using that, and any future sour cream purchases will come from him. Info. How did he snack on sour cream? Like with a spoon? I can't get that thought out of my head. For everyone responding, just put some seasoning in it and it's a dip, that's not what boyfriend did. And that's still weird to eat a full thing of dip in one day. I think there's some people here that aren't properly grasping that sometimes $3 is a big deal because you just don't have it. Not the jerk. Not the jerk, that's infuriating. Make him take on all of the mental load and responsibility of grocery shopping and you pay for the utilities. He'll learn how much he disrespected your money and time. Your arrangement doesn't seem equal if you're spending way more time and effort to fulfill your portion. Just saying. You're the jerk. You know you're privileged when the only thing you can complain about in life is your boyfriend eating the sour cream. You sound like a very pleasant person to be around. If my boyfriend ate all the sour cream, I'd be like, dang babe, you must have been hungry. Am I the jerk for telling my husband the inheritance for my grandparents should go to my sister's kids if anything happens to me? I, 31 female, came into a very good amount of money once my grandmother passed last month. We're still sorting out the details of taxes and retirement and so on. Just for some background, both my parents and grandparents own fairly successful companies and made my husband, who's 33, sign a prenup agreement when we got married. My husband was fine with it at the time and for the most part still is. Now that some of that money is starting to come to us via my grandma's passing, things got a bit weird. We don't have kids and are still kind of on the fence about if we actually want them in the future. However, my sister has twin boys and I love them dearly. I'm extremely close with my sister, but not so much with the rest of my family. My husband has 3 nephews and 2 nieces on his side, and I'm not very close with any of his family. We get along, but I just would consider us friendly, not close. We were talking about wills to make sure we have everything in order in case anything happens to us. I mentioned that even though we have a prenup, I'd like to try to find a way for him to get as much as possible. Then I mentioned, if we don't have kids, I would also like a chunk to go to my sister's kids and any other kids she may have for college or a house. He became very standoffish and asked about his side, mentioning it wouldn't be exactly fair to not leave any of the inheritance to them. I said I understood where he's coming from, but we aren't close with them, and this money was given to my family. He says I'm being selfish for not including them, but he does see where I'm coming from. He's been making some comments about how he still doesn't think it's fair, and now I'm starting to think I'm a jerk for even mentioning it. I don't know. Am I the jerk? More info. I do need to look at the prenup again. I know the main reason for it was to keep my share of the family business in the family. I know there's a clause in there about him not having them, even if I pass. My parents mentioned another trust they have set aside for me, but I'm not sure exactly the terms. If I pass before I get that though, my husband would not receive any money from it. That's more of why I'm trying to get around it as much as I can. My sister, along with all the other grandkids, also got a very nice inheritance from my grandparents. I want to state again, I want to leave the bulk of the money to my husband and some to my nephews. We are still in the beginning stages of all of this, so I apologize for not having a ton of details. Not the jerk. He can share his share of the inheritance if he wants them to have anything. Not the jerk. You can always do a postnup. Why should your inheritance go to your husband's family as opposed to yours? For now, put the inheritance in an account under your name only, with your nephews as beneficiaries. Make sure that's reinforced in your will, and tell hubby if he gets an inheritance, he's free to do the same. Karen wife demands my son remove a social media post about her. My wife and I are both in our mid-30s and we have a 14-year-old son. I've been a stay-at-home dad all of his life, while my wife has been more hands-off due to a somewhat demanding job. Still, some basic facts that anyone with even a surface level knowledge of our kid knows is that he's a good kid. He gets good grades and he's well behaved. He's maybe a little spoiled, but aren't they all? My point is, I've rarely had to step in and deliver any real punishments thanks to open and consistent dialogue between the two of us. I have a longtime friend who plays in a decently popular local band. He's a father figure to my son, and they also have a very close bond thanks to similar interests. My son has always been the artsy type, and he's so excited when my friend comes over because it means he can show him the latest guitar he's added to his collection or a new riff that he's learned. During my friend's recent visit, he mentioned going on tour soon, and my son was intrigued. After pressing for details, he came to me later and asked if he could go with them on his fall break. He had plenty of promises at the ready, that he would listen to whatever friend said, that he would be on his best behavior, that he would never ask for anything ever again. After talking it out with him, I gave him a maybe. I reached out to my friend for his thoughts, and he was all for it. I figured he wouldn't mind since he has a son around my son's age who goes on tour with him occasionally, another thing my son had mentioned while pleading his case to me. I asked my wife, and after a very brief conversation, she agreed. Fast forward to the beginning of last week when he got packed up and set to leave. My wife asked where he was going. I reminded her, and she said she thought I was joking. I had no idea what part of it sounded like a joke, but she claimed my son wasn't allowed to go. I eventually persuaded her after our kid went to his room in near tears. When he arrived home yesterday, I had never seen him so happy. He got to help the roadies set up for the shows. He got let into bars. He intentionally didn't wash off one of the X's from the back of his hands just so that he could come home with it and show it to me. And friend was singing his praises over how helpful he was. A few hours later, my son made a social media post compiling photos from his time on tour. The caption was a long one, but included such gems as, "This almost didn't happen. Thanks, Mom." And, "Friend spent a lot of his free time with me, unlike my mom." This led to a pretty big argument where my wife, upon being alerted to the post's existence, demanded that he take it down. He refused, so she turned to me and asked me to talk to him. I refused. I told her that while I didn't think what he was doing was right, it was clearly coming from somewhere, and that somewhere was a place in which he was feeling unheard and ignored by her. She's been ignoring me since. Am I the jerk? Edit. To answer a question/comment I see commonly coming up, I'm not encouraging my son to air our dirty laundry on social media. I just don't think the first move should be to tell him to delete it when there's clearly legitimate hurt motivating what he's saying. We're the parents. We can't move on impulse based on our feelings. It might be the gut reaction to ask him to delete them, but instead, I want us to take a pause and come to him with empathy and understanding, where we discuss the matter together and help him decide what's best. As a lot of you are saying, this definitely is a teachable moment, and not one that can be easily impressed onto him by just saying, delete the post, and not reinforcing the why, along with more positive ways to express himself. Edit 2. Please save your "get a job" comments. I plan to once my son gets his license. However, even if I didn't plan on rejoining the workforce, there's nothing wrong with former stay-at-home partners who choose to be homemakers. My wife and I mutually agreed on this dynamic, and she very much prefers working. This is not a productive addition to the conversation. Update. Hi all, this has certainly been a journey. I definitely knew that there was a stigma against a more gentle approach to parenting, but I never knew it was this large. When my son woke up this morning, I took him out for breakfast where we had to talk about everything. Just as I mentioned in a comment, I wanted to have a talk with him in a way that led him to see what he had done wrong and hopefully independently inspire him to fix the post. Pretty quickly into our discussion, he pulled out his phone and showed me that he already had. He said he had started feeling guilty and changed it the night before. If this hadn't been the case, or if he had refused to make changes, I would have put him on a 2-week social media ban. Because despite what some people in the comments have said, I do set boundaries with my kid. Discipline typically falls on the parent who is around their kid the most, in my experience. We discussed how it can feel good to get things like this off our chests on social media, that it's a thrill to be a little petty and have people see it, but that the excitement is short-lived. Obviously, he agreed as he was already feeling guilty. I suggested journaling, writing a letter and giving it to me, his mom, or another trusted adult that he can vent his grievances to, etc. I reassured him that his feelings were valid and I wanted him to express them, just not in a public arena where, if he gets too used to running to social media, he could say something really inflammatory and awful in a moment of anger and then really regret it. This was obviously an open discourse between the two of us. Social media is a precarious place for young men to be right now in certain circumstances. I feel lucky that I fostered a bond with my son where he can openly talk to me about what he's viewing, his thoughts on social media, etc. It was a good conversation that we've had in the past, and one we will revisit frequently in the future. Thankfully, he has male role models in his life that provide him with positive views on masculinity, so he doesn't need to run to the jerks of the world. Finally, the conversation turned to his relationship with his mom. This part feels incredibly personal, and despite this being an anonymous platform, I'd prefer to keep the nuances of my son's inner emotions regarding feeling ignored to myself. But I can tell you we've decided to have a family meeting before dinner tonight to discuss solutions, like family therapy. I'm committed to helping foster a connection between them in whatever way I can. I think that this best can be done with the help of a therapist or a mediator. My own relationship with my wife and what that will look like in the future needs some fixing as well. Most of all, I want us to be strong co-parents. And quick side note, because I saw it coming up frequently, he wasn't exposed to anything he shouldn't have seen in the bars. He hung out with the other roadies, drank mocktails, but a majority of the time, he was by the soundboard. He's very interested in that as a future career path, and this just ignited an even deeper love for live music. I appreciate the concern, but I'm not letting my 14-year-old do more than maybe have a sip of my wine at dinner because he wanted to taste it. Thank you for everyone who engaged me in a polite manner. I definitely agree I was the jerk in some aspects here. I could have acted sooner and rectified the situation last night. I need to work on communication with my wife. I need to do more in supporting her connection with our kid. The advice was appreciated. I'm opening to answering any more questions in the comments. Call me crazy, but I think OP sounds like a really good dad. But you know the people on Reddit are probably going to tear him a new one. Let's see what they thought about him. Of course your wife is ignoring you. You're supporting your son publicly disrespecting your wife because of a simple misunderstanding between you two about the tour. Your son is 14. Yes, there will be plenty of times where he's upset with either of you and will want to vent. But you just told him it's okay to passively aggressively post those emotional and hurtful words publicly. You just supported him in hurting your wife instead of teaching your son to handle those emotions in a healthy and respectful way. I wouldn't be surprised if you always play cool friend to your son and force your wife to always be the bad cop. You're the jerk. I 100% agree with this. Me too. It's important for parents to back each other up. If this guy keeps up the you and me against your mean old mom act, he's going to destroy his own marriage. Your kid is still that, a kid. You're the jerk. You're teaching him that airing your dirty laundry in public is a-okay, better than actually talking with your family about your problems. Unless your wife is actually crazy, this all sounds like it came from a verbal misunderstanding. When she agreed, did she say something like, haha, yeah, of course he can go on tour unsupervised with a band for a week? You said the conversation was very brief. Why is your communication so good with your son? It's really not if you won't even tell him you disapprove of what he's doing, but so crappy with your wife. ETA. A lot of your replies keep showing how much time you spend with your friend parenting your son. How your wife is never around. Do you happen to have an art studio in your home for this friend? Yo, I also just read the part where your son was let into bars during this trip, and you were happy about that? You really are a terrible parent. Also, for those curious, he answered the brief convo question in another comment. He said to his wife that the tour lined up with their son's fall break and he wanted to go. She responded literally, sounds doable, and that was the last time they spoke about it. Edit for OP's update. Man completely misses the mark in every way. How his wife can put up with this guy is beyond me. Your son edited the post. You told him it was okay. What he wrote was valid, then blamed your wife again for being a distant parent. You never told him it was your fault she wasn't aware the trip was planned without her involvement. Don't plan to apologize to your wife, and don't plan to have your son apologize either. I feel bad for your wife, and worse for your son if you teach him that treating his mom like this is a good example of what a man should be. You weren't the jerk in some ways. You're just the jerk, even now. Period. You're the jerk. Your wife works so you can be a stay-at-home dad to a 14-year-old, and your son hasn't figured out why his mom is busy? You're clearly failing them both, teaching your son to be spoiled and to only respect what you have to say and showing your wife you're only using her to fund your lifestyle and her thoughts and feelings are meaningless because she's too busy funding said lifestyle. You have the time and pull to teach your son right from wrong, and it only matters when it comes to you. Your wife has trusted you to not only be a great dad, but to be a great partner by being the one to work, and you failed to do that. Your son should know better than to disrespect his mother in such a public way and get enjoyment from hurting her feelings. She could communicate more, but you and your son are both being inconsiderate about how her time is used, and that's your fault for raising him to value you over her. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. I guess it really is a good thing we don't have any kids because I think OP sounds like a great dad. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.